Hey everyone, what is the crack? Welcome back to the channel. Please don't forget to leave a like if you enjoy the content, subscribe if you're new here, and hit that little bell notification icon if you want to keep seeing my videos when they pop up. Thanks so much, I really appreciate it. Let's get into the video. I have played 8 hours of the Outriders demo that released the other day. Comparatively to some of the numbers that other people are putting in, it's admittedly not a lot. However, these 8 hours gave me enough of an overview to decide how I felt about the game in a general sense. The fact that people are literally out there grinding a demo of this game speaks volumes about Outriders' potential. I'm going to briefly discuss the core aspects of the game which I think are the most important to understanding what exactly Outriders is. Prior to the release of the demo, I heard so many comparisons to, other popular looter shooter games that are available today, and no other game came into that discussion nearly as much as Destiny 2 did. I mean, I have relative experience with Destiny 2, 2,000 plus hours of game time on PlayStation alone. I think I know what I'm talking about, more or less. Discussions repeatedly bring Destiny 2 into the conversation while speculating on the potential of Outriders in the shared looting shooting space. However, this is in spite of Outriders developers plainly stating their game is not a live service game, and all of its content will be old school and printed on the disc, so to speak. For sure, elements of Outriders mirror that of Destiny 2, but despite this, in my opinion, the similarities end there at the surface level. Saying that, I will probably have to come back and continue using Destiny 2 as a reference throughout this discussion. Yes, I'm contradicting myself already. Stick with me. I think for people to truly see Outriders' worth, you need to acknowledge the Destiny 2 comparisons and specify why the differences are what makes Outriders stand on its own 2 legs in this genre, which has seen so many failed attempts over the years. Many games have attempted to quote unquote kill Destiny, and all of them have failed. Borderlands 3, huge potential in the minds of many people, ultimately collapsed on itself due to lack of a meaningful endgame, not to mention the cringy voice acting and dialogue. Anthem just flat out fell on its face despite having some of the most interesting mechanics and stylistic traits in the realm. Flying mechs with jetpacks, come on, how did you make that boring? Oh my god. Avengers, I haven't played it personally, but from what I've heard, it fell into the trap of just a rushed release that lacked any real depth and felt pretty empty, days into its release. Destiny 2, despite its problems, has remained afloat all these years as a dead game. And I think Outriders, saw these failures in its compatriots, and instead of tackling Bungie's behemoth, chose to attempt to coexist alongside it. Outriders is a game that represents a meaningful loot system in an all-inclusive day one package. Early in the demo, I found myself questioning and talking to my friends saying, but why will I come back to this game in a year's time? What's going to keep me here? And after spending a lot more time thinking about it, I realized I won't be playing Outriders in a year's time. What's wrong with that? Before I speak about the core components of this looter shooter, the looting and shooting, I want to address the game's looks and performance. I played on the PS5 and I cross-played with a friend who was playing on PC, and I also did some solo gameplay. On the opening day, we both praised the ease of setting up cross-play game sessions and how well the game ran in general. We could join each other very quickly and without any real hassle. I think we only experienced one disconnection, and that was just within minutes of the demo starting and all of the queues of people getting in, scaling up the servers, etc. So honestly, pretty normal, and they handled it very well in my opinion. However, we played again the next morning and we experienced consistent errors that, both of us were disconnected at different times for seemingly different reasons. My friend who plays on PC had many bugs that have been reported throughout the community on PC, such as the inventory glitch, where basically opening his inventory would crash the entire game. His frame rates were much lower. We don't know what the differences were on day 2, but things definitely went kind of downhill and left a bit of a bitter taste in our mouths. However, I did one final PlayStation solo after this again by myself and had a much more stable time. Don't know why, but things just seemed to run better. Visually, the game looks pretty fantastic. I mean, it's not the most beautiful game I've ever played, but it definitely stands out. The locales the game takes you to are pretty lush and beautiful at times, and then also very gritty and surreal at other times. The game ran pretty flawlessly. For me, it's 60 frames per second on console, some minor dips, but nothing crazy. The particle and gore effects and explosions were plentiful and very enjoyable to stare at. Audio design and weapons and abilities was loud and gritty in an enjoyable sense. Did experience pretty frequent audio glitches where dialogue lines just didn't match to what was being shown in a cutscene, for example. Kind of took me out of the moment. Hopefully it's something that's fixed. Overall, the game ran, sounded, and looked pretty amazing. Outriders gunplay is good. That's it. End the video. No. It doesn't really compare to, some AAA shooters in my opinion, like Destiny 2. But it's very good. It's perfectly passable. A very exciting aspect of the game is that even in the early game loot, weapons feel exciting and actually really powerful. I only managed to get as far as blue gear, which is called rare, I think, because the RNG gods, did not grant me any legendary loot that you've probably seen popping up around Twitter recently. They look amazing. There's some grindable missions where it's possible to do it, but the current drop rates are very low, and I just didn't have time to do it, to be honest. In the game there are your usual weapon archetypes: shotguns, assault rifles, LMGs, snipers. Nothing particularly novel, at least in the game at this point. Saying that, the guns, they feel good, they feel solid. Shotguns are brutal up close, sniper headshots are very satisfying. I even found myself hip-firing revolvers and pistols like a space cowboy or something, and it felt fun. The cover system is optional at best. The game actively encourages you to be as aggressive as possible. More on that later. I couldn't help but to compare the gameplay to Gears of War, a game that more or less set the standards for third-person cover-based shooters, while Outriders kind of pales in comparison to the iconic classic weaponry such as the Lancer or Gnasher from Gears of War, even compared to the weighty movement feel of Marcus and his friends. It does an admirable job of giving you punchy loot with a functional move and cover system, even if the cover system is optional. The perk system mainly applies to higher level gear. You can harvest mods from guns, combine them in any way you want, and legendary weapons, so once that becomes readily available to players, it should be very exciting. Build players are salivating over this game right now. Synergy between gear sets and higher level weaponry is something that the community is watching eagerly. Outriders features 4 classes: the Technomancer, the Trickster, the Pyromancer, and the Devastator. So far, the Technomancer is the only class I have played as, straight up. Most players likely jump between the classes, experiment with them all. Technomancer actually kind of just left me satisfied enough to save some content for the full game release and kind of give me enough information about how the game feels to make my decision on it. I've heard almost unanimously online that the Trickster is the most fun element of the game. Its time-bending, melee-focused abilities seem super cool. Saying that, the Technomancer actually blew me away upon unlocking all its abilities too. The missile salvo, I think, represents some of the highest DPS in the game. It was a particular highlight for me and almost felt broken how much damage I was doing with it. I've definitely littered this video with those clips. So much fun. Outriders, being a PvE focused game, gives it the chance to just go crazy with player abilities like that. Since PvP balancing and tuning isn't an issue, safe to say the devs didn't hold back. The Technomancer represents what will be considered a support character. Launches flurries of deadly rockets at enemies from a distance, tosses turrets that launch freezing projectiles at enemies at will, tosses proximity activated shrapnel grenades that devastate enemies with an AoE effect. You can infuse bullets with toxic damage that tickle damage on surrounding enemies over a time. There's so much room for support play. The potential for synergy between players of different classes is huge in this game, and when my friend and I found ourselves kind of getting used to it, lining up our abilities, flanking tactics, surrounding our enemies, the game really flowed. The demo withheld even more abilities to be unlocked later, and based on what we've seen so far, I'm guessing the best is yet to come. Abilities is one area in which Outriders really shines. When you walk into the next area in a given mission in the game, dubbed arenas, you are met by a suspicious collection of dispersed horizontal waist-high cover. You know exactly what's going to happen. To my surprise though, Outriders gives this cover kind of as an option, a coward's option even. One of the most unique and fun mechanics the game introduced was its healing system. There are no health packs or pickups in Outriders. In fact, each class has its own unique method of regenerating health. Something you will do a lot, particularly in high level content, also called world tiers, or when playing solo. The Technomancer, for example, could regenerate health based on damage dealt. Because of this, the game encouraged me to, maneuver aggressively and promoted tactics to allow, keeping your character healthy by pushing the enemy. My friend, when we played co-op, was playing as the Devastator class, and in order for him to regain his health, he needed to get close range kills. Because of this, we synergized our character's strengths and weaknesses in order to keep us both alive. For example, he would launch himself at the enemy using his missile titan-esque attack, while I would stay at the periphery, launching my missiles and grenades as support, while picking off enemy with my weapons. It felt really good and meant the game didn't kind of fall into that boring cover-based shooter cliche where you just cower behind cover, regaining health constantly. Oh, and some of the cover is destructible too. Nice. Okay, not to constantly bring up Destiny 2, that game I previously said we shouldn't even be comparing to Outriders, but I just have to say that one of the most disappointing things for me, probably consistently throughout the series in Destiny, is that it has a kind of lack of increasing difficulty across the game. Sure, we have Grandmaster Nightfalls, which are balls to the wall sweat fests. Trials of Osiris, no thank you. Master level activities, honestly actually pretty good. Keep that up, Bungie. These are mostly great, but that leaves the majority of the game in a state that lacks any real challenge. PvE patrol zones, for example, are laughingly easily traversed. There's no challenges, there's nothing to take on while you explore. There's no dark zones, hard zones, anything. Outriders introduces a nice system called world tiers that allows you to scale difficulty across all content while simultaneously increasing the quality of the loot obtained from said content. This means something as simple as the opening campaign mission can later be replayed at a higher difficulty for higher rewards. This not only increases the longevity of the content, but also provides you with more sandbox for you to test your endgame gear on. Optimizing my Guardian in Destiny 2 with high level gear and weapons feels like a lot of input for not a lot of output. My weapons maxed out and my armor perfectly statted feels wasted when there's just so little content for it to be tested against. Overall, I think this is a hugely important component to how Outriders strives to remain relevant in a market where endgame and reasons to return are often the biggest downfall for releases. The devs have outlined how this world tier system will expand after the story finishes also. This will give players an even bigger selection of content to test their endgame master synergized gear and weapons against. Sounds great. I don't want to spoil anything on the story, so I'm going to keep this very vague and very short. The story is fine. In the opening scenes and gameplay, I was a little bit underwhelmed, to be honest, and kind of cringing a little. Some of the dialogue is a bit However, there actually are some pretty cool narrative twists and turns in the early stages of the story that, kind of got me to sit up and pay attention a bit more. I highly doubt this game is going to blow anyone's mind with the story it has to tell, but it's going to be entertaining at the very least. The way it's delivered is, unfortunately, another thing though. Gameplay and cutscenes are just really frequently disrupted by, closing to black, load screens, these weird 2-second interlude cutscenes they include of your character just opening a door or hopping over a wall. The disruptions occur quite frequently and they kind of stop the flow of the game. It's a minor inconvenience, but in a game with a somewhat lukewarm narrative, it's essential that can flow as smoothly as possible. So if you're coming here for story, I wouldn't recommend it, but at the same time I wouldn't disregard it either. So, when all is said and done, Outriders represents a fun, loot-driven, third-person action shooter with a somewhat interesting plot and a finite selection of content. The game runs amazingly well on my PS5, it looks amazing. This game is not going to kill Destiny, nor will it die like Anthem, in my opinion. Outriders is going to exist on its own 2 feet in the looter-shooter space and just say goodbye long before it overstays its welcome. I can't wait to dive back in.